City Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me. I'm Bernie Furshpan, host of Raised by Survivors here on hmTv at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. I have a very, very special guest who's also raised by survivors, Mr. Peter Shafran. Thank you so much for joining me today. You are a publisher. You're a founder of a magazine.
That's correct.
Called The Other. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today with me and talking about your father's story.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
Good.
Very good. The Other. How'd you come up with a name like that?
So The Other takes several different meanings. Number one, people who, at least in high school and when I was growing up, people who consumed cannabis were the others. And so we're all the others. There was also a very famous Grateful Dead song called The Other. And the third is a magazine, actually a newspaper that was started in the East Village called the East Village Other in 1968, which was one of the first radical newspapers of the hippie or that era, which was a call to action against the Vietnam War. So,
what is your background? Were you a journalist? Did you study English in college? What was...
Very badly.
Very badly?
No. No.
With a Brooklyn accent?
The last time I was involved in publishing, I was the editor of my law school newspaper, Hofstra Law School here on Long Island. I was the editor of Conscience. And that's the last time I did anything to do with publishing. So I was a lawyer for 35 years. I closed my practice, tried my hand at a couple of other things. Nothing really felt right. And I figured for the rest of my life, whatever that time is, it's got to be something that I'm passionate about.
Something meaningful.
Something absolutely meaningful and passionate. And I saw a vacuum. There are plenty of trade magazines, but there were no consumer magazines. And here we are, this was in 2023, there were 12 dispensaries in the entire state of New York. And people who, our age, I'm assuming you're in a contemporary, people in our age who may have not consumed in 40 or 50 years legally ever, it was a whole new ballgame. And so we decided to start a magazine, my friend and I, and the friend who started it with me, also a Holocaust survivor, who we both went to yeshiva together. So here's two yeshiva boys who made it into publishing.
How interesting.
Yeah.
And how's it going?
It's going beautifully. Yeah. We started, our first issue was October of 2024. It's a quarterly magazine, and our 7th issue is coming out next week. And we've expanded into live events, and hopefully by this summertime, we'll be doing podcasting too.
You mean podcasting?
I do mean podcasting.
Pun intended.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm very happy for you, and I wish you much success.
Thank you.
I think you found a niche.
Yeah.
That was needed, and you fulfilled a need. This is great. Now, both of us were raised by fathers who lived in a forest. My father lived in Poland. He lived in a forest from age 10 to 13, from 1941 to 1944. So I don't know if your father had a similar experience. And where in Poland? Was it in Poland?
It was in Poland, and it basically overlapped. So in 1940, the Russian army was coming. So my father lived in a town called Ukani, in Yiddish, Nachan, which was I was going to say suburb. I don't think they had suburbs back then. It was a village outside of Hrubieszów in the state of Lublin. So it was 70 kilometers from the what was then the Russian border, which is now the Ukrainian border.
Right.
And so my father and his father were, I guess, recruited to come across to the other side to work with the Russians to build fortifications against the encroaching Nazis. And 6 or 8 months later, when they got back, the Nazis had already come in and wiped out, or taken out everybody, including my grandmother and two aunts. And so my father and his father survived. When they came back to the village, the Gentiles in the village who were friends with him said, "It's not safe here. You can't stay." And that was not only the Germans, but also the police, the apparatus of the Polish army. And so my father and a bunch of people and his father left, and they joined the partisans in the forests. And they survived all through the war in Poland, crossed over into Czechoslovakia, crossed back into Poland, and then back into Czechoslovakia, and eventually in 1943 and 1944, they ended up meeting up with a Jewish brigade who brought them over the mountains and into Hungary, Austria, Austria, and then Italy.
Many people don't know that there was a lot of resistance by Jews. They thought that they all walked into the gas chambers like sheep, but they didn't. There was a lot of resistance, but very few survived because it was difficult to survive under those conditions and circumstances. My father lived in a village also in what is now Ukraine, so very close to the Russian border. So they must have had a similar experience. Maybe they even crossed paths. His village was close to Rovno, okay? And just north of where he was, in Belarus, you had the two brothers who also built this partisan...
The Belskis.
The Belskis, who built this partisan army in the woods. It was not easy surviving those conditions. When your father and grandfather went back to the village and found out that they wiped them out, they must have been so disturbed. And the villagers told them, you better get out of here. Even after the war.
Right.
You would think that anti-Semitism died, but no, it still existed even after the war. It didn't kill anti-Semitism, that's for sure.
Right. When you said, the marching into and coming back into town,
right?
The villagers basically, those who were friendly, basically, said, it's not us, it's the other people. But of course, who turned them in the first place?
Right.
And so my father then found out that most of the townspeople were marched towards Sobibor. And most of them, I don't know about most of them, but many of them perished along the way on the road to Sobibor. And so he has no idea as to whether or not they perished there or not. But you were saying about the Belskis and about the partisans, and I'm sure you get this a lot, is when you tell people that you're the child of a Holocaust survivor, the first thing they always ask you is what camp?
Right.
And not everybody went to camps.
No, half of the Jews that were killed in the camps. The other half were killed in villages and died of starvation
whatever
or
the
frost or whatever.
Right.
Sure. You somehow have managed to deal with the Yiddish culture, correct?
A little bit,
right? With humor and memory, abyssal. What role has Yiddish language and expression played in your life?
Well, like many of us survivors, we grew up in a time where parents and grandparents and relatives always spoke Yiddish so that the kids wouldn't understand what we were saying.
Yes, but we understood.
We understood, exactly.
We learned it quick.
Yes. And my father was always pressing upon us about, the loss of not just the language, but of Yiddishkeit and Yiddish culture.
Right.
And so my father was, there were two types of survivors. There were the people who were traumatized and don't want to talk about it at all. And there were the people that were also traumatized, but said it's our purpose of being alive to keep talking about it and keep telling about it. So that was my father. And so my father would speak at any opportunity there was, whether it was school or civic or politics or whatever, to tell everybody the story, because never again is what the slogan was. But basically, my father's feeling was we didn't have newspapers. We didn't have, I don't think my father mentioned anything about the internet, but we didn't have newspapers and radio the way we have today. And if we want to keep in touch with what's going on, we have to be vigilant. And my father read the Daily News, the Post. I don't know if he read the Times, but he also came home and then watched the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and the 11 o'clock news.
That was
just
my
to
dad.
make sure, right?
You know, they were part of the same culture.
Yes,
So
yes.
they also wanted to know the news. He followed, I remember the Vietnam War very closely. Any war, he
Right.
followed very closely. He felt connected to situations like that. And I'm sure, you know, he was haunted by
Yes.
his experience, and I'm sure your father as well. How was your family history? How did it influence your views on Zionism and the idea of a Jewish homeland?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bernie. I think that when I'm the eldest, so when I was in kindergarten, it was basically time for the parents to decide where they're going to send me to school. And at the time, we were living in Queens and then moving to Brooklyn. And my father's older sister, who was the only other survivor, and my uncle basically told my father, didn't suggest, they told my father, you need to send him to yeshiva because that's the only way he's going to get that kind of education.
Right.
And their son went to yeshiva as well. And so the Zionism was instilled upon me both in the house, but also in yeshiva. I went to Flatbush Yeshiva, where we learned Ivrit be'Ivrit, which was a big new concept back in the 60s. And but it was Zionism. And so we always were raised that way to always have a love of Israel.
So I also grew up in Brooklyn, and in fact, I took driver's ed from yeshiva high school, I guess that's what it was. I lived a more secular life. I went to James Madison High School, so not too far from wherever you lived in Brooklyn.
Right.
Brooklyn was a small town in so many ways, right? Everybody knew everybody. But you kept Yiddish alive. You also wanted to preserve not only the language, but also music, correct? You know, my parents loved Klezmer music. It's really polka music, isn't it? And to some degree, with a twist of sadness in it. That's what made it Jewish, I think. And my father told me that the Klezmer band would come into the village on one end and end up in the other end and invite everybody to the wedding that was at the other end of the village, right? People came out of their storefronts, kids came out of school, everybody was invited. It was a different world. It was a different time. Things were simple, and they all loved each other, and they celebrated life together.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, about Klezmer. Over the years, I've learned a lot more about Klezmer, and one of the things I've learned is that Klezmer, like other forms of music, borrowed from here and borrowed from here. So Klezmer is really jazz and folk, and the folk tunes. But the Klezmer is all jam band and instrumental, noodling around to get the sound, and that's why a lot of people. There were some performers who make that transition between Klezmer and jazz.
It was very simple because they had the clarinet, they had the violin, the fiddle.
Right.
They had a drum. What else did they have? They had the accordion.
If you have the melody going this way,
right,
everybody else could noodle around on the other fringes, which made it really interesting.
Do you play an instrument?
No, one of my biggest regrets. But I was a concert producer for a dozen years.
So was I.
I know you were, much on a much smaller scale than you. So I was. I have a company called River Spirit Music, and for about a dozen years, I produce concerts in Westchester, everything from Tarrytown Music Hall to my living room.
It's amazing that we didn't cross paths before. Maybe we did and we weren't aware of each other.
Yes, well, after the interview, I'll tell you how we probably know each other.
Yeah, how interesting. How interesting. You know, I've produced concerts in Lincoln Center. What is that? The Hammerstein Ballroom.
Sure.
And then I was the booking director. Not only did I have my own venue, the Metropolitan Room, which I booked and produced 6,000 shows there, but I also was a booking director of the Triad Theater. So there was a lot of, small-time cabaret kind of performances, which is a lot of fun. It's very intimate concerts. So I love music, and I wonder if you and I, because we've done the similar things, right? I wonder if how much of that is the responsibility of our parents trying to instill in us the Yiddish culture, which is part of that. I mean, music was part of their culture. It was celebration. It was about celebrating life and Zionism and Yiddish and the whole Yiddishkeit thing.
Well, I'll tell you my experience in terms of music. And I say this with absolutely no humility whatsoever. I think one of the things that I grew up with in terms of both my parents was an understanding and appreciation of culture, not only Yiddish culture, but all kinds of
all
culture.
Cultures, right.
My mother was also a singer, so I had that background. And so when I say with all humility, in being a concert or a festival producer, and I wonder if you felt the same way, I would like to tell everybody that I have great taste, and you should listen to what my music, what I have discovered.
Right.
And for instance, when I did concerts in my house, people who ran house concerts would have the same people playing over and over and over again. And I said, let's get somebody from Kansas City who has never played in New York. Let's get somebody from Chicago. And so I said, I just want to introduce these people and expand their knowledge just like I'm expanding my knowledge. And it's not just music.
Right.
And
fantastic. I'm also a believer that we should learn about as many cultures as possible.
Absolutely.
Because really, it's all one big human family, and diversity is what nature wants. And so the variety that we offer as a human society is just incredible. So this is all the potential of one person, right, in different forms from different cultures.
Well, so I'll come back around to the name of my magazine.
Yeah.
The Other.
The Other.
We want to embrace the others.
Right.
When they're the others, you can hate. But when they're in your group, you can't hate them anymore.
No, you can't.
Because they're your brother.
Right.
They're your sister. You can't hate them anymore.
And music is the common language
Absolutely.
that unites and heals us all. You know, people who perform and play musical instruments are basically, to me, are healers. They go
Without
out
a
and they
doubt.
heal the world.
Yeah.
That's why music is so important.
Absolutely.
All the arts, all live performances.
Yeah. Well, we're learning it through science. It impacts certain parts of the brain.
Right.
There are studies done with people who have lost parts of their memory. There's a great movie which involves the Grateful Dead called The Music Never Stopped, I believe is the name of it.
Yes.
Where a guy had brain damage and his father just came and played records for him and accessed the last pieces of his brain that actually could. And it's, there are so many stories about things like whether it's smell or music or taste that activate parts of your brain. But music is the absolute controller of the brain and accesses parts of your brain that we don't even know. It's going to take us another 50 years to figure that out.
It's true. I mean, music is one of the first forms of communication. I mean, many cultures created music through the drums, okay? And cultures that were separated and isolated from each other, but somehow, some way.
Hey, you hit your rock with a bone the same way I do.
Right, exactly. and it's funny how, and it's very interesting, how cultures that were separated created music simultaneously.
Right.
And one had no contact with the other, but it's just something that's inherent in us to communicate this way.
That's right.
It's really an incredible thing. I find that also, this is something I never discussed with anybody, but my father, when he talked and he had a point to make, and when he was done, he put his hand down. And I'm thinking that's a beat.
Right.
He closed the cycle with a beat. And I'm thinking that's definitely a form of communication.
Oh, absolutely. In yeshiva.
It's a statement.
In yeshiva, the rabbis would be talking about the Talmud, and they'd have the beat.
Right.
And you'd listen, and it would be mesmerizing. You had to pay attention because
Isn't
the
that
beat
incredible?
was there.
Wow.
Didn't think about that until I was an adult.
Let's talk about food.
Yes.
Yiddishkeit food. I was raised on Polish food. Okay? So I'm gonna ask you a few questions here. I'm gonna mention the name of the food. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of whether you enjoyed it or didn't. Okay, you ready?
Oh, I'm going to tell you in advance.
Yeah.
They're all going to be thumbs up.
Well, let's see. Let's find out. Okay. I'm gonna give you a thumbs up or thumbs down as well. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Chopped liver.
Thumbs up.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Love chopped
Yeah.
liver. Stuffed cabbage. The best.
Oh, yeah.
Chav.
I'll still go for borscht.
Pacha.
Okay. No.
Oh, really?
I have a story
Oh
about
my
pacha,
God.
so
So
I'm going over
To
here
me,
on pacha.
Pacha was this jiggling substance. To me, it was like kryptonite. I couldn't stand it. I didn't like the smell of it. But tell me about your story.
So my father loved pacha.
By the way, let's explain what pacha
Yeah,
is.
so-
It's calf hoofs boiled.
Right.
It's like a witch's brew, and they
Or
got
if you're a French chef, you might call it aspic. It's very tasty, but if you're a poor Polish Jew living in Ukani,
That's what you ate.
It was whatever you can get from the butcher for pennies
So
on the
if
dollar.
If it was calf hoofs, they boiled it. They made jelly out of it. It was full of collagen, I guess.
Right. The cartilage just came apart.
And it's very protein-filled meal. But my father loved it. I couldn't stand it. It had garlic and it had meat and it had
no, it
eggs in
didn't have garlic. It had garlic.
It had you could smell it with the refrigerator closed.
My father used to cook it with heads, not cloves.
Right. Heads of garlic. Yes. So tell me about it.
So my father would cook this on occasion, and he would announce it in advance because in case you ever wanted to leave the house, now's the time. My father would cook it on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And we would leave the house because it was bad. And I hated it. So I went to college, and my roommate, who's still one of my best friends today, had a completely different story about pacha, that his mother made pacha and his grandmother made pacha that was the envy of everybody in the Bronx. And he told us the story that his mother would make the pacha in the Bronx with the windows open by DeWitt Clinton High School, and his uncle would be driving by and do a U-turn because Sylvia was making pacha. And so
He would smell it in
he
his
would
car.
smell it 2 blocks
Oh,
away
my God.
and come to get it. So
Yeah.
yes, pacha, there are people who
Right.
like it, and there are a lot of people who hate it.
A lot of people think that some of this food is Jewish food. Like, for example, challah bread is braided Polish bread. Bagels, Polish, right? Stuffed jelly donuts, Polish. Stuffed cabbage, kishka.
Right.
Loved kishka,
Love kishka.
right? Gefilte fish, I was a big fan.
Me too.
Not a big fan of the jarred
No.
gefilte
no.
fish, but my
The loaf.
mother made it
From scratch.
From scratch.
Right.
And why was it called gefilte? Because the word gefilte means to fill. So it was the filling that we eat now in the jar. Those are just the fillings. She would put it inside of a carp,
Right.
right? It was like a carcass of a carp, right? She would gut it out and slice it, and then she would fill it. And that's what gefilte fish was, a filled fish with the stuffing of the fish itself, right?
Right.
I kind of enjoyed it, quite honestly, with the jelly.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
today, it's a little different. My kids can't stand it.
No.
They can't swallow this stuff.
No.
So, I mean, Yiddish culture, I'm glad it's still around.
Well, then
quite
I'll ask you
honestly.
one more.
Sure.
So matzah.
Matzah,
Do
okay.
people like matzah? People hate. In my opinion, Matzah is, one step above cardboard.
Okay.
It's a great delivery system.
It's a delivery system. It's a vehicle.
It's a vehicle, right?
For
exactly.
jelly, cream cheese.
Right. Nobody eats matzah for the sake of matzah.
No. Nobody eats it alone. Yeah, put chocolate on it, a chocolate spread.
Right,
You
exactly.
know, nowadays, if you go on Instagram or Facebook, they have all kinds of incredible recipes for matzah. And I've seen them do cakes with it and all kinds of omelets with it. I used to make matzah brie. And I actually like matzah bread because, first of all, I like eggs.
One of my top 5 foods.
I like eggs with a little salt and a little butter, and then you put matzah in it to give it a little bit of a crunch. It makes it fantastic.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you, this was a fun conversation. Thank you so much, Peter Shafran, for joining me here today.
My pleasure.
What are your hopes for the future of our youth today?
Interesting question. I think my wife is laughing at me.
I think so.
I think the problems that we see today in terms of education, in terms of the youth today, and I'll just give you a very quick, for instance. I saw a show the other night, and they asked 10 college students, where is the Strait of Hormuz? 0 knew where it was.
Unbelievable.
Even things like from the river to the sea.
Right. What rivers?
What river and what sea?
Correct.
I don't know.
They have no idea.
I have no idea. I'm just repeating it.
It's amazing. We knew these things when we had a great education in Brooklyn. I got to be honest with you. I knew history very well. I loved history. But today, the education is a little different.
Yeah. Well, it's different, and it's also...
It's lacking a lot.
Well, the other problem, depending on whether you consider it as a problem, is that if it takes more than 3 seconds to read, it's boring.
Right.
And even as the magazine, we have an online version of the magazine as well, and we recently compared our magazine to other magazines, and my COO said people are spending 1.7 minutes on our articles, and I said, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And he goes, oh, that's way higher than a lot of other magazines.
Right.
1.7 minutes.
Per article. So they're reading it. They're fascinated by it. I guess,
Right.
You have a niche audience, so
Right.
they're obviously interested in the topic.
But in other magazines,
Right.
like the whole BuzzFeed that created this situation is if you spend more than 10 seconds on it, you just swipe and move to the next article.
Because this is our culture today.
This is our culture.
And maybe they are teaching some of these things, but the kids are not grasping it because they have to spend a little more time.
Well, I hate to be one of those old people yelling at the sky, but recently there was an article that in college, they're not requiring people to read the book.
Right.
You can just read the excerpt. Well, how are you going to know the ending of Dickens or of Melville if you haven't read the whole book? Just reading the excerpt of it, which is what they used to yell at us all the time, that we read the Cliff Notes. This isn't even the Cliff Notes.
And unfortunately, with AI, a lot of young people are looking up, the synopsis of a book.
Right.
So it's unfortunately that people don't take the time to really look back at the history, because history, unfortunately, keeps repeating itself. These cycles keep repeating, and so we obviously don't learn a lot from the past. But I want to thank you, Peter Shafran, for joining me today. Very interesting history of your father, meaningful life that you have today, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate my audience's time today for tuning in to another episode of Raised by Survivor. I'm Bernie Furshpan here at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. So if you enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations. Until next time, be well.